right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We're so excited to see you all here tonight for our first fall edition of our Mental Health Story Hour. So my name is Karin Broberg, and I am the coordinator at NAMI-NYC for our In Our Own Voice program. And In Our Own Voice is a public education program where folks who have mental health struggles share their stories and talk about mental health, as well as a little bit about the different resources and support that are available through NAMI-NYC. So I wanted to start with just a really short introduction to let you know a little bit more about NAMI-NYC in case this is your first time joining us for programming. So for those who are not aware, NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and we're the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. So NAMI organizations exist all over the country, but we of course come from NAMI-NYC, the local New York City organization. And NAMI-NYC provides advocacy, education, as well as direct support, both for people who are struggling with mental health challenges themselves, and also for family members and friends. So in terms of some of the supports that we offer, two big things are our classes and our support groups. Our classes and support groups are all completely free, and they're also peer-led. NAMI-NYC is a really peer-focused organization. And what that means is basically just that if you attend a support group or a class, for example, for people dealing with mental health issues, it's going to be facilitated by someone who's also living with those mental health issues. And if you attend a support group or a class for family members, it's going to be facilitated by family members. So this is something that's really important for us. We want to make sure that when you contact NAMI-NYC for support, you're being met by someone who can really understand and kind of empathize with what you're going through. NAMI currently has over 40 different support groups, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about all of them because we'd be here all night. But I can share that some of our groups are focused around, for example, a specific mental health concern or diagnosis. So for example, we have groups specifically for people who are living with depression, living with bipolar disorder. We have a group called Hearing Voices, for example. And then we also have some groups that are centered around an identity. So for example, we have our Black Minds Matter group or our Asian American Pacific Islander mental health group. We have an LGBTQ group, for example. So for folks who maybe are struggling with mental health and want to talk about it in community with others who identify the same way, that's an option. And then we have, again, various groups also for family members of friends who might have a loved one who's struggling. And you can find all the information about upcoming support groups, classes, schedule for various events via our website. That's at naminyc.org. And I also wanted to mention we have a really awesome phone helpline that you can call. Either if you're wanting to learn more about NAMI's different services, or if you need other support or just, someone to talk about mental health. The phone line is available Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and put the number to that into the chat here for everyone who's interested. But that's a little bit about NAMI. And then again, what you're going to hear tonight is two volunteer presenters from our In Our Own Voice program. So we're so excited to hear from them. I think we can go ahead and get started. I will pass the baton to Gina and Nina.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is having a good day so far. My name is Nina. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I graduated from Syracuse University, and I'm currently a writer and blogger. I do some content creation, and I'm also a creative workshop facilitator, organizer, and host. I love writing and journaling, making stickers, crafting, overall being creative, and I share it all on my blog called Sparkly Word Tanks. And now I'm going to turn it over to Gina so that she can introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Gina Epstein. I also have a blog called Utopia. I write about I'm originally from New Jersey. I moved to New York when I was 20, and I left 7 years ago after living in New York for 33 years to live in Costa Rica. So I live in Costa Rica. So I write about having mental illness and living as an expat. I also was a documentary filmmaker. I had my own company with my husband, and prior to that, I was in fashion for 18 years. I was a fabric buyer. Now I am living in the pure vida life, I guess you could say. And I have a wonderful husband and a beautiful daughter who's going to be 11 in 11 days. So that's me. And so I just wanted to go on and say that our purpose here today is for us to share how our mental health has impacted our lives and what kind of habits and things that we do and changes that have happened with our mental health. The presentation is divided into 3 parts. First part is what happened, then what helps, and what's next. And at the end, I think in the chat, there is a link to an evaluation form. If you could fill that out, that's really helpful for us we'd like to see how we're doing and how we impacted you, if any at all. So thank you. I'm going to pass it back now to Nina, and she's going to tell you what happened.
Thank you, Gina. So I've been diagnosed with persistent depressive disorder, formerly called dysthymia, and PTSD. So growing up, I was a perfectionist. I especially loved to go above and beyond in middle school and high school, which meant getting straight A's, perfecting all of my assignments, and doing really well on tests. I was strict and expected so much of myself at a young age. I suffered from low self-esteem, and a lot of my self-worth came from overachieving. I thought that by being perfect in everything, I would somehow feel better about myself. Oftentimes, I felt alone and I didn't know who to talk to, which led to those first depressive symptoms. On the days I felt most alone, I isolated myself and I didn't speak to anyone for days on end. I continued with my perfectionism up until my senior year of college, where I started feeling those anxiety symptoms. So taking care of myself, which meant balancing schoolwork, remembering to eat, getting a good amount of sleep, all became really hard for me. I found myself putting schoolwork first because I thought that was more important, but I started to worry a lot. I worried about how I was going to complete all my assignments, about my family back in Brooklyn, my lack of motivation, and I dreaded the thought of each day not being able to give my absolute best. The defining moment I remember at around the time I had to take the GRE, which is kind of like the SATs for graduate school, for those who haven't heard about that test before, was when I felt my anxiety show itself. I was constantly nauseous. I had zero energy. I didn't sleep much. Life felt like a blur. And I was constantly worrying about my future, who I was going to become, and what was really happening to me. At my worst, I felt disconnected from myself. I felt like a zombie. I was simply existing and I had no idea at all how to feel. I was numb. I isolated myself and I stopped talking to everyone. I went to class and I went home and I did my schoolwork all on autopilot. I just kept going and pushing myself to my limit. I then started to experience daily panic attacks from feeling constantly overwhelmed and overworked. My thoughts were always racing and I found it really difficult to calm myself. I was exhausted all the time. One of my academic counselors was the first person who suggested I go to the counseling center at my school, but I didn't want to at first because I thought I had to just get it together. Because I grew up in church, I was told to just pray everything away. And if anything was wrong with me, I blamed myself, and I thought I had to fix what was wrong all on my own. I told myself that I didn't need anybody's help. I was so used to pushing myself beyond my limit, and at that point, never considered what that would do to my mental health. I didn't even, I never heard of the phrase mental health until this part of my life. Deciding to go to the counseling center was the first step I took in understanding what was happening to me. It took a couple weeks to convince myself to start going. When I started going to the counseling center for a little while, that counselor suggested I go to psych services for more stable and longer therapy. I didn't like going to therapy because I didn't think anything was wrong with me, but the more I talked in both places, the more I learned the impact of my experiences on all the anxiety that I felt. I didn't have the greatest experience with seeking mental health support at my school due to the changing of locations and not being able to stay at psych services because of the wait list. But I did learn a lot about myself and the amount of time I was receiving help for the symptoms I was experiencing at that time. So thank you so much for listening to my portion of what happened for me. And now I'm going to give it right back over to Gina so she can share what happened for her.
Hi. So what happened to me? I come from a Italian American family. Um, so a lot of yelling, a lot of people being loud, a lot of unfiltered um, talk in our house and in my family. I'm the youngest of 9 grandchildren, very spoiled, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And when I was 5, I was at my grandparents' house, and my grandfather, who had mental illness, we didn't know it at the time, but he started hitting my grandmother, and I had to call my dad and ask my dad to come get me, rescue me. Of course, being 5, I didn't deal with it. I pretended like it didn't happen. And then between the ages of 9 and 11, I was molested by someone else in my family. And my youth was kind of taken from me in a lot of ways. I was always an outgoing person and always had a lot of friends, but I was pretty much depressed a lot of the time. I did a lot of theater in school, and then when I got into high school, there was no theater, so I ended up self-medicating. When I was 9 and when I started getting molested, I started self-medicating with food, and I became a laxative bulimic. I would take laxative, I would binge, and then I would take laxatives. And so when I was in high school, I started self-medicating with drugs. And even though I was a mess, I wanted a life, and I worked hard, went to college near where I grew up, and I stayed at home for 2 years, and then I moved to New York City to go to FIT to work in fashion industry, which I did. 10 months after I got to New York, I was raped by someone I knew. And those next 4 years, my weight was up and down. I got to a point um, that I really wasn't functioning very well. And my grandmother had passed away, and she was one of the closest people to in my life. And my parents separated all on the same weekend. And I came back to New York, and I sat on my bed and cried and asked for help, asked God for help. I didn't know what to do. And the next day, when the Village Voice was the Village Voice, I found it, and I looked in there and I found a therapist. And I remember him asking me, so what's your goal in therapy? And my goal was to get better. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I wanted to get better. So I came out of that portion of my life was that I was a compulsive overeater and a bulimic, but and he would always suggest to go to OA, and I didn't go to OA right away until I hit a bottom again in my addiction. And uh therapy had taught me, didn't matter how much I ate. I stopped doing drugs because that wasn't my drug of choice, food was. And he taught me, didn't matter how much I ate, I was still going to feel the pain. So I decided to go 12-step program, which totally changed my life. I did the steps. I was very fortunate to do the steps in the way original AAers had done the steps. There was a man in the early 90s named Arthur. He would take you through the steps like the original AAers had. He had approval from one of the original AAers to do that. And I had a spiritual experience, which saved my life. Not that things got like all of a sudden magically easier, but I was able to process all the sexual abuse, the violence in my life, and see a lot of things that went on in my childhood that I thought were my fault that really wasn't. And after that, I was still working in the fashion industry. I started not to like it. It's I liked my job. I liked being a fabric manager and buyer, but I didn't. The people weren't very nice. It was a cutthroat kind of business. And I've always acted and sang. Even in New York, I was in a theater group in Jersey City for a while. I took acting classes later on, but that was always something I wanted to do. So I did a lot of personal development after I got out of a 12-step program because I had been an addict since I've been 9. till I was 27. So I didn't know how to be a person, to live life, as they say in program, to live life on life's terms. So I had a friend introduce me to this woman's weekend about being in a relationship with yourself and a relationship with other women and a relationship with men. It's an awesome, awesome weekend. And I realized I needed to be in a relationship with myself. And then I started doing a lot of courses at Landmark Education. I up and for a long time. I did a lot of courses, and I was in a team management leadership program, which totally I really got who I was and in that program. One of the cool things that I did was with three other women, we produced an off Broadway show. We performed in it and we produced it. We broke even, and I realized that I wanted to do films, narratives for women. That was my goal, and that was in 2000. And I was stopped because my dad got cancer and passed away. So it took me to 2002 to go back to school. I went back to the new school, and I had a really good experience there, and I graduated with honors with a BA in film studies. But my last semester was really hard. I made it hard for myself because I always make things hard for myself. I wanted to do narratives for women. That was my goal. But when I got into college, I took a documentary film class, and I realized that documentary films bring people together. And I wanted to do that. And that's what I pursued. And so my last semester, I decided that, they had a media studies program, master's program at the new school. And my grade point average was really high, and I could take a couple courses. So I took the last 3 courses I needed to take to get my BA, and then I took 2 MA courses, and I was freelancing. I freelanced at Ann Taylor. So I was working and taking these classes, and I had gone back into therapy in 2003. I had a new therapist, and I've always had depression. I can probably acknowledge that at the time, but I was drinking a lot. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I was drinking a lot of Diet Coke at the time to stay up to do projects and papers and watch movies and all that kind of stuff that I had to do. And she suggested that I should go to a psychiatrist. So I went to a psychiatrist. He said, "Oh, you're bipolar 2." Interviewed me and said I bipolar 2, gave me medication, and I would go see him. And then I met my husband, got married, we had a great documentary film business. We were traveling, it's a very exciting time in our marriage and our time together. We love that, and we want to do it again. But what happened was in 2008, the crash came, and we worked a lot of the companies and the people that we worked with didn't have money to hire us anymore. And by 2013, we didn't really have a business. And 2009, my husband went back to work, and I went looking for work. And at the time, I was a woman over 40, and I had a lot of experience and degrees, and nobody wanted to hire me. And I was really depressed because I had married someone older than me who had children, who didn't want to have children. And I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I went into a very deep depression. And my doctor gave me some medication, and wasn't the right dose of medication, I found out later. Um, and I went through about a year and a half of a serious depression. Came out of that by the grace of God and good therapist. And I learned a lot about myself during that depression, because it was the first time really that I wasn't by myself and depressed. My husband got to witness it, and I would be on the couch and he'd be going to work, and it was very different, very, very difficult. And I fought being depressed, and till I decided not to fight to be depressed anymore. It's kind of when it appeased itself. But that changed my life, because I ended up looking for support, and I found NAMI, and they have a great peer-to-peer course, which I highly recommend. And I found out that about mental illness, and that I had mental illness, and it was an illness, and it was a really great program. And so later on, when I was my husband came home and said, look, he was in therapy and I was in therapy, and he was like, I have no plans for retirement. I'm not one of those people who has like, I want to go fishing, or I'm going to do this or that. Let's try to have a kid. And of course I was in I was like 46. And it took me, so I was about 49. I got pregnant at 49 with my daughter. And that was a whole journey. A lot of my anxiety came out. But it was a blessing because I had my daughter. And but during that time, I was over medicated. And before I got pregnant with my daughter, I wanted to get off all my medication. And I had a doctor who was over medicating me and saying, oh, it's okay, you could be on all this medication. And she had me so medicated that one of the medications I was taking, that if you take it at a high level and your level gets high and you take it a high dosage, which she was giving me, you become irrational. And I became irrational, and it scared my husband. And he took me to the hospital, and I was in the hospital for 3 days. And a kind resident there didn't come out and say that I had a terrible psychiatrist, but he basically, in so many words, told me that he did. And my level was so high. So I was going to Columbia University for their reproductive center. And they suggested that I go see an OBGYN because I was trying to get pregnant. And I spoke to her, and she said, you can't be on all that medication. You have to be we only let you be on 3 medications. But, there's a really, people love this doctor. They call her Dr. Lucy, and she's supposed to be really good. So I went to Dr. Lucy, and she was really good. She was excellent. She helped me get off all my medication before I got pregnant. And I had my daughter. Life was good. And 2 years later, my mom and my aunt were killed in a car accident. And I developed PTSD. A year and a half later, we moved to Costa Rica. I made sure that I had a psychiatrist before I got here, and that psychiatrist recommended a wonderful therapist. And I wasn't even here a year, and they both decided that I wasn't bipolar. I had explained what I thought was a manic episode, which was actually an anxiety attack. And so I started to get off some medication. And the psychiatrist I was going to at the time wanted me to take a long time to get off one medication, like almost a year. And I had gotten off this medication before I got pregnant, so a lot quicker. And so now I have a different psychiatrist who I adore. And so that's what happened.
So the main thing that's been helpful for me in my recovery journey, especially since that time in college, is growing in self-awareness and self-acceptance. So something major I learned from that semester of therapy in particular was how mean I was to myself. How I spoke to myself was strict and limited. I had so many expectations, and I never was proud of any of my accomplishments. Realizing all I realized was really hard for me, but it made me more aware of how to begin to recover and be gentler with who I was. I wanted to be more active in loving myself. The year after I graduated college was the hardest year for me. So this was late 2016 into 2017. I was excessively worrying all the time. I isolated myself in my room often. I had nightmares. I experienced insomnia at night and slept during the day for the first few months. So during this time, especially at night when it was quiet, I found myself writing everything I was feeling and all the memories that were hurting me. What I learned in therapy in terms of how I was speaking to myself opened my eyes to new ways to look at those past experiences. So, why did I become a perfectionist? Who did I really want to be? And how did I actually want to feel? The first step I took in my recovery was admitting to myself that I had these anxious and depressive symptoms in the first place. After that step, after I stopped ignoring those symptoms, trying to just wish them away, I felt really relieved. So writing and creativity became my tools for healing. My blog, Sparkly Tinks, allowed me to write all the negative thoughts I had about myself, but instead of believing those thoughts, I reversed them into something more positive. So I created quotes and poems, notes, and creative prompts to remind myself to keep going every day. My motto is to always remember to be gentle with myself in my journey. So here's an example of a sticker that I made with an affirmation that I practice, and it says, like a butterfly, I allow myself to transform, transform more into who I am every day. I will learn through the challenges and never give up. I acknowledge that transformation takes time and patience. I am ready. Around this time is also when I started writing articles for The Mighty. The Mighty is an online social wellness website and community where people write about their experiences with their conditions as well as seek support from others. And this became the first way I connected with others who also experience anxiety and depression too. After I started writing articles, I became more comfortable talking with my family about everything I was going through. I didn't keep my mental struggles to myself as much. I isolated myself a lot less and I used my voice a whole lot more. So at the end of 2018, I actually also started planning, organizing, and hosting mental health events with the Mighty for a little while. I went on to become a Mighty community leader and now a community manager. In 2019 is when I found NAMI-NYC through a Facebook ad on ending the silence. And ending the silence is kind of like what I'm here sharing with you guys, except we go into the schools and I've been sharing my story for the past 5 years. And we've been talking about self-care and just kind of opening up the dialogue about mental health because mental health is really important. And NAMI has been an incredible resource for me to open up, share my story, and gain confidence in myself and in my voice. In the same year, I also finally got the courage to look for a therapist to begin talk therapy. And this was close to four years following that experience in college. So that was a really, really big step for me. And now I'm continuing to go to therapy. And that's one of the biggest things that's been helping me kind of like navigate my symptoms and all the changes and continuous transformations that I go through. So thank you for listening to what helped for me. And now I'll give it right back to Gina and she can share what's helpful for her.
Hi. So I'm going to kind of reiterate some of the things that Nina said. One of the things I got from a 12-step program was self-confidence. When I went through all that stuff and came out on the other side of my abuse and everything and feeling good about myself, I wanted to venture into the world and, and I did a lot of personal development, which also gave me confidence and self-love. So I too used to talk to myself terribly. When I was younger, I used to call myself the fat bitch. That's how I referred to myself. That's horrible. But one of the things NAMI gave me when I took the peer-to-peer class was acceptance. Now, when I first found out that I was bipolar 2, there was a bit of a relief because I knew there was something, I just didn't know what it was. And but slowly but surely, you can't tell people because of the stigma and all of that. And that was 20, God, I was diagnosed 20 years ago. So I came to a level of acceptance by doing the peer-to-peer class. I learned that I had a mental illness. Like my brother's a diabetic, he has an illness, I have an illness. Actually, my mother said that to me when I told her I was bipolar. She said, "Oh, you have an illness, take your medication." And but I have an illness and it can be managed and I can still have a life. And that's true. I can. But even when I do all the things that I do, and I'll share with you right now, I am right now experiencing a lot of anxiety because I'm making a lot of changes in my life. And one of the things, it's not just accepting that you have this illness, but when the illness hits you, you have to accept that this is what's going on. And there's nothing bad or wrong with you. You have a mental illness, you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, and you may have to call your doctor, which I did today. You may have to, do other things. I did energy work yesterday, which actually was quite helpful. But I have to accept that it's okay for me to be in my illness, because so often we work and we manage every day. I get up and I check in with my head. Where are you today? Sometimes I need to exercise more. Exercise is crucial if you have mental illness, especially depression and anxiety. I was miss running in Central Park. I do run around here and I do run to the beach, but it's just getting that energy out when I'm anxious, or just getting the endorphins going when I'm depressed. So we have a swimming pool. I swim every day. I have to move. There's things, that are so that I do all the time, right? And even though you do all those things all the time, you can still get triggered, or you still have this illness, and it does come up. And so most of the things that I do a lot of what Nina does. I'm a big journaler as well. I've been journaling since I've been a kid. Um, I do practice a lot of things that I learned in personal development. I try to change my mindset about things. Right now, I do exercise. I do have a psychiatrist. I don't have a therapist right now. I'm looking for a new therapist. I believe in talk therapy. I had two of the best therapists in New York City. Um, I loved my therapist. The last one I had, I was with her for 14 years, and I walked in her office and I had all these goals in 2003. By 2013, I had met all of them. And so I highly recommend talk therapy. I also, living here in Costa Rica, has discovered horseback riding, something that you think my anxiety wouldn't like, but actually the minute I get on a horse, I am calm as anything I've ever been. So I love doing that. And I do energy work called Kundalini activating process. And it's not yoga, it's energy work. I actually did a blog on it. My blog is called Gtopia. It's gtopia.com. And I have a support network of people in my life, people who have mental illness. I have an extremely supportive husband who's done the family to family. I have friends here who are therapists who I can turn to. I have a support network back in the States I turn to. I think it's very important to have a community that you can lean on when you are not, you're struggling or something comes up that you need to deal with. I also am a mother, so being a mother helps me confront my stuff pretty much head on when it happens, because I don't want it to affect my daughter. But I want to tell you something beautiful about my daughter. Last weekend, my anxiety and stuff kicked in, and I had a couple days I wasn't really myself, and I said to her, I had a couple rough days. Was kind of out of it, not myself. And she said, Mama, everybody has days like that. And I just thought that was just so beautiful and special that she said that to me. And she knows I have mental illness. I don't hide that from her, but it's not her responsibility to take care of me. It's my responsibility to take care of me. So, but living in a place where there's nature is important. When I lived in New York City, the last 12 years no, more than that. Maybe the last 15, no, maybe last 20 years, I lived near Central Park. And it's vital for me to be in nature. It just makes me peaceful. It reminds me of the beauty of God and the possibilities of recovery and healing, because nature's always recovering and healing. So that's what I do.
We're going to talk a little bit about what's next for us. So I've come such a long way, and I'm really proud of myself and my success in the past 8 years. I'm now a huge supporter of mental health and mental wellness, and I want to show others that it's okay to reach out when they need to. I currently plan, organize, and facilitate the expressive arts workshops with NAMI-NYC as well. And these workshops help me to be more open and creative with others about who I am and how I want to become more and more of myself in this recovery process. I also got my certification in mental health awareness, mindfulness, life coaching, and journal therapy. And I also love to learn. So setting aside time where I can gain new skills and perspectives help me to feel fulfilled and grounded in myself. Um, I also haven't added this, or I probably should add it to when I share about my story, but I did graduate magna cum laude with honors and distinction. So I think that that was a really, really big step for me um, in terms of what I was going through at the time and how I can like define my resiliency. I can say that like I was still able to do this despite the challenges that I was going through. Also, I have to always make sure I'm on top of my self-care. So I'm learning to use meditation and mindfulness, breathing exercises, and my favorite herbal tea to help relieve those anxious and depressive symptoms I still experience. But I sleep a lot better now, though, so that's like 1,000 points for me. So it's really important for me to set boundaries and have limits, especially as I recover from perfectionism. And as I move forward, I'm consistently understanding how to best speak up for myself and know that that's 100% okay for me to do. Overall, the diagnosis of persistent depressive disorder and PTSD does not stop me from advocating for myself and helping others to also advocate for themselves. And as I use creativity and a more holistic sense of health and wellness, reflection, and being mindful of how I'm speaking to myself, I'm on the road to radical self acceptance and loving every single part. So thank you so much for listening to my story, and I'll give it over to Gina so that she can share what is next for her.
Hi. So, what's next for me? Um, so I live here in Costa Rica, and I have a daughter who's who's going to be 11 in 11 days, and I have a husband who's almost 17 years older than I am. So, I'm I write a blog called Utopia about my experience here and having mental illness, and I'm going to make that a book. I've been working on that. Um, I am just, I'm still growing as a person, and I got this opportunity to go back to school online. Just by coincidence, I'm getting an executive MBA because I would like to go out in the world I would like to work in the mental health field. Um, but I would like to have I do have an MA, and I also graduated with honors despite myself. And I think this is why my anxiety is a little reactive, because an MBA feels so different because I'm a creative person. I've always been a creative person. I've been a writer, I've been an actor. Last year, I performed in a dinner theater here in Costa Rica. So I'm always up to something. I'm always growing. I don't think you get to a certain age and stop growing as a person. I think you can still keep growing and growing. And as my husband's getting older, my daughter is getting older, I want something for myself. So that's what I'm looking up to find something, writing my book, and hopefully I'll get a position where I can work remotely and travel and come back to New York as often as I like. And that's it. So thank you so much.